I still say that Atlanta teams, we have the most fun. We've been villains in the past, we're less so now, but I think we're still trying to be a little bit of those guys.
The Growlers took every bit of Atlanta's best punches and were right there with them for 4 quarters. They just bite down on you and they don't let go.
It's kill or be killed in a game like this. We are not going to win without going right through their
Dean Ramsey rips it down for the hustle. What a play. Perfect put to exactly where it needs to be.
Welcome back. It's Swing Pass. I'm Adam Ruffner. That's Evan Lepler. We are recapping as well as giving insight into the latest action from around the UFA. And man, oh man, this season sure doesn't disappoint when it comes to entertainment. After a wild week 4, numerous upsets and overtimes throughout the association, we have arrived, I think, at the most... I'm just going to go ahead and say it, the most chaotic early season standing situation this league has ever seen. I mean, we'll get into it in a second, but basically we have all of the champions from the last 6 seasons on the outside of the playoff picture as we near Memorial Day weekend. It's phenomenal to try to keep up with what is happening in this league. I mean, what is your assessment after another weekend of just, again, completely unexpected results, seemingly star performances across the league? Where's your head at?
My head is at up is down and down is up and right is wrong. It is different than it has ever been before. It feels different when you see a team like Houston, who was previously winless, dominate Colorado the way they did.
Dominate.
Yeah. I think the next biggest surprise was Oregon. They had been pretty non-competitive through 4 quarters in their first 2 games. And, even if they didn't pull that game out against Seattle, they looked like a different team, but they did pull it out. It was happy for Montreal to get one because they had played New York really tough the week before. And obviously, we may look back and say Montreal's had the toughest schedule in the league through the start of the season, this side of Carolina, who's also sitting at 0-3. So, yeah, I mean, I just love this league right now, Adam. It was a crazy weekend for the league. It was a crazy weekend for me trying to follow the league because I was at my cousin's wedding. Shout out Noah and Haley. It was a great time. And, I'm doing what all rational Frisbee fans do at the wedding, watching 4th quarters on their phones. And the problem was the New York-Montreal game went to overtime, and that was right around when they were doing the first dance. Yeah, I still had my phone out, but then the horror started, and Jews know what I'm talking about. You got to get involved. So the phone had to go into the pocket, and I missed the overtime of New York-Montreal live because that's what we do. But yeah, and then see you later that night, after you've been dancing and had a few drinks and find a place in the corner to sit. And oh my goodness, I got another overtime game to watch. It's Seattle and Oregon. Who saw this coming? It was just so much fun and wild to follow the scores from around the league this weekend. And yeah, I think one of the other things I wanted to mention before we get into it is I'm so appreciative of all the people around this league that put so much into it. You and everybody else who works for the league, but also the players and coaches. Every week I email different people, text, call, but mostly email, seeking perspective to put into the Tuesday toss and to make me smarter about what happened. And I think this past weekend I reached out to more people than usual because I was not able to watch as much myself. So I just felt like I had to cast a wider net. And the detail and depth and level of insight that I get from players and coaches around the league is just so awesome. I feel so lucky and so fortunate to do what I do. And I know you feel like the Tuesday toss is already way too long. I agree with you. I try to be brief when I can, but then I apologize to Madison and Pittsburgh because I got some good perspective on that game too, and then just totally goofed and forgot about it in the 4,500 word 7 on the line segment that I wrote. And yeah, like it could have been twice as long as it was because there's so much interesting, like different tidbits and situations from games. Like, the Boston New York game. Like I wrote about the one controversial play at the end with Tyler Chan and Solomon Rushmeyer-Bailey and Calvin Brown. But you watch that game, like I didn't even mention Toba DeCrana in the toss. That's journalistic malpractice because he was unbelievable. And Jeff Babbitt continues to make these MVP plays and just the unsung heroes and the sung heroes that, you have to kind of pick and choose what you focus on. So I'm excited to dive in a little deeper with you on stuff here on the pod because, man, these games deserved it. Where do you want to start?
There's so many places to start, right? You got 5-0 Atlanta. They look like the best team in the league right now. I think not too far behind them are teams like Oakland and Boston. Maybe even a shout out to, Philadelphia with their really hot start right now, just as far as how teams look to begin this season. But I think where we should start, where might be most instructional, is the standings and just talking about where records are at right now, right? I mean, after this past weekend, we finally got to see a glimpse of the Chicago Union and their completely revitalized roster. Some of the new additions there, making really splashy starts. Was really impressed with Xavier Payne in that crisp white Union kit. I also think Jace Brunner coming back to that team. He's like a human hand grenade in the reset spaces for their defensive schemes. He's just like a blitzing corner or something for them. He's just so disruptive against opposing handlers. And you could just see Minnesota's offensive attack throughout their home opener was just unable to establish a rhythm. But I digress. Let's get to the standings. So let's start in that Central Division after their win in Minnesota, 16-11, just kind of choking out the wind chill. The Union sit atop that divisional standing leaderboard at 1-0, followed by Madison and then Pittsburgh. Both of those teams at 2-1, but Madison owning a tiebreaker head-to-head after their victory this past weekend in the Radicals home opener. So right now in the Central Division, if the playoffs were to start today, Minnesota, the reigning champions, would not be in the postseason. And this is going to kind of be a theme as we go throughout these divisions. I'll just get through it quickly so then we can get to discussing it. East Division, got 4-0 Boston sitting atop there, followed closely by 3-0 Philadelphia, and then 2-2 DC, who sustained a 14-11, which was deceptively close final score loss to Boston this past Sunday.
Boston was in control.
Oh, man, we can talk about it in a moment, but Boston just dominated DC defensively. I mean, I am just so impressed with what the Glory are doing with their defensive one-on-one coverage. But they lead that division. Second place, Philly. Third place, DC. You know who's not going to be in the playoffs potentially for the first time since 2017? 2-3 Empire after their 0-2 week 4 results. Just continuing to move on through the standings. In the South Division, we've got, as I mentioned before, 5-0 Atlanta leading that division, followed closely by the Simmering Soul at 4-0. They've got 3-1 San Diego. San Diego have, of course, all 3 of their wins against their SoCal rivals from Los Angeles. So something to watch for as they embark on their South Division test against Carolina and Atlanta in this coming Week 5 schedule. But you know, in the South Division, you have 0-3 Carolina outside of that playoff picture, and then just kind of wrapping up standings talk. In the West, you've got 4-0 Oakland.
No mention at 1-3 Houston, huh? Overlooking the Havoc.
We can talk about the Havoc. You know I'm on the Havoc bandwagon. I really like that organization. I like how they're building from, in from without. I love what they've been doing with the addition of all these veteran handlers, which really paid off in this win against Colorado.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just, you mentioned the 5th place team, but you didn't mention the 4th place team.
Well, Carolina has been to a few championship weekends the past several seasons, won a title in 2021. Houston, all the love in the world for them, but they just won their first game against a non-Dallas franchise. So just putting some perspective there. But in the West Division, you got Oakland leading it at 4-0, followed by 1-1 Salt Lake. And then even after their somewhat disastrous trip through Texas this past weekend, losing both at Houston and then at Austin, Colorado at 1-2, still clinging to that third and final playoff spot in the West Division. But you know who's not in the playoff picture there? 1-3 Seattle after their overtime loss in Oregon, the reigning division champs. Very much on the outside looking in. They face a brutal Week 5 road trip at Salt Lake on Friday, and then at Oakland on Saturday, facing the top 2 seeds in the West Division, looking to avoid a 1-5 start. Whew, I'm out of breath, and that's just going through the standings, man. Not even talking about the details of these teams. It's just,
well, I mean,
it's completely
to your
upended
point,
where we started the season from.
Well, that, everybody starts 0-0 each year, and I think we've gotten used to, like, New York being a threat to go undefeated every year, and kind of the same teams being great and planning our life around those marquee matchups. And what we're learning is other teams are catching up. Like, I remember when New York went undefeated 2 years in a row, and, heard some murmurs of frustration around the league, like, do we need to do something about this? And my thought was like, no, like, we don't need to lower the Empire standard. We need to raise the standard everywhere else. And, circumstances happen to the Empire. They're having like a really tough year just from an injury standpoint, with Jack and Antoine going out this past weekend. But yeah, things are changing, things are evolving, and the standard is rising. And teams that went to championship weekend last year are now sitting at 4-9, which, like, we haven't seen anything like this to start the season. It's also important to note the context. Like, Carolina's 0-3. They've played 2 really good teams. Atlanta twice on the road, DC at home. I still expect Carolina to be good, but, the panic button is pressed for Carolina if they lose to San Diego at home this weekend. And they very well could, let's be honest, because the Growlers played Atlanta to the brink 2 weeks ago and have a lot of really talented players who are not going to be afraid going up against Carolina. Like, frankly, there's more pressure on Carolina going into this home game than there is on San Diego. The one random question I'd love to ask you, what's the more difficult doubleheader? At Salt Lake, at Oakland, back-to-back days, or at Atlanta, or at Carolina, at Atlanta, back-to-back days? With the teams as they're currently prescribed.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we can flip the question a bit of who needs at least one win on their respective road trips, because I think if there's any team that's getting to a do-or-die moment right now, it's got to be the Seattle team. I mean,
no doubt.
I think, to your point, Carolina's just faced some steep competition. I think they can get back, on the saddle at home against San Diego. I think the Growlers just face a tough uphill climb, but I think even if the Growlers drop both games this weekend, they won't be in the same sort of pit that Seattle faces, even if they kind of split this upcoming road trip at Salt Lake and at Oakland. And I think just given the environmental factors of having to go to elevation and play this really athletic shred team, and then go on the second game of a back-to-back and face this track meet that has become the Spiders organization, that's just going to really put a stress test to a Cascades team that has already been kind of going through. I mean, you talk about a team with some uncertainty in their lineup and their rotations. This Cascades offense has already gone through a couple iterations. They didn't have Aaron Wolf on the road this past weekend, and that I think that really showed in the 1-goal loss. And now with their season kind of on the brink, it's, can they get it all back together? And I just think you see such a massive mental shift for the Scades team kind of being the reigning divisional champs. Last year they got to come out from under. They were kind of the Cinderella story, this team out from nowhere, hadn't made the playoffs in several seasons, and they're going to rally around and make this late season push and kind of ride the momentum all the way to a semifinals berth. And this year it's just so different, right? It's a completely different mindset, having to kind of defend your keep and be the team with the target on your back. And I just think you see the week in, week out grind taking its toll on a Seattle team that is otherwise still pretty competitive. I mean, not totally, falling apart in terms of their performances. They're just not able to close out in the same way with the same kind of energy that they did last year. And I think, especially on defense, they've just taken a step, if not 2, backwards. And it's been all the difference in these close margin games.
Yeah, I think you're right on. And just to expand on that, a point about the Seattle Cascades, like, yeah, they had some big margins last year, but they will be the first to tell you they had a pretty friendly schedule. And it's not like they were a dominant West Division team. They finished second in the regular season. They snuck past Salt Lake in the division final. And just, we admired the heart with which they played. And we also looked at the roster they had coming into this year and said they have most of the same faces back. I don't know if we gave enough emphasis, though, to, and maybe we were unaware of, Spencer Lofink's injury. He was the team leader in completions last year, more touches, more yards than anybody, basically. And he's just taken out of commission for the first big chunk of the season. Also, Khalif, like we knew Khalif, and Khalif played a bunch of different roles, but really valuable as a leader and as a distributor. And then another guy, like one of the guys that played every single game for them last year, Jasper Dean, just kind of disappears. And, 21 assists, 10 goals, 19 blocks. He was 7th on that team in completions. Like, they're just missing a little bit of that firepower and continuity, because we said, they got Ambrose back, they got Garrett Martin back, and Mark Munoz, and Zepp Browning, and Christian Foster, and Tommy Lee, and, like, Jack Brown. Like, they've got a lot of the similar faces, but it is a different team, and they've had a tougher early season schedule, and they've had some bad breaks go against them. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, their backs are totally up against the wall, and it's going to be tough because Salt Lake also is going to be hungry. Like, this is a really big opportunity for the Shred.
Before we move on too far, I just wanted to draw on your point. I think especially the Lofink comment is particularly apt in this moment because we talk about where this Cascades team is struggling so far in 2025, and it's been inside the red zone. This was a team last year that finished 3rd in red zone efficiency. This year, they're 3rd worst. And against Oregon, they had 9 turnovers inside the red zone. And that, to me, is absolutely the shadow cast by Lofink's injury. I mean, he was such an important churner in that space alongside Garrett Martin for that Seattle offense. And without him, you just see a little bit more hesitation at that end of the field. And that's, again, where they cashed in 2024 and really made a lot of hay in, I think, close results games.
It's a great point. And just to, quantify it, like the Cascades through their first 4 games, just 72% in the red zone, as you said, 3rd worst. Last year, they were 3rd best, 84%, only behind Atlanta and New York. So yeah, that's a great pull by you. I hadn't even realized that yet. And that is a huge part of the story. And let's be honest, like Houston probably would have beaten Madison if they had done better in the red zone a couple of Friday nights ago. So like that red zone and the Havoc have been a team that have struggled in that department historically. They were 2nd worst last year. They're in the bottom 3rd of the league right now. Those numbers aren't always indicative, but in certain cases they can, be the reason why a team is struggling. And yeah, Lofink with his size and his reach and his release points and his just calming presence back there, it's a big deal.
Goal scorer. He was, very subtly a nice target. He's tall, kind of has that like fullback potential near the goal line where he can just get in kind of with his framing and size and sort of seal out on certain goal possessions. I mean, I remember especially kind of in the second half of the West Division final last year, he scored a few times just sort of getting open up line or finding space next to a front cone. And I feel like that ability, that again, that clinching power that Seattle had in 2024 just isn't quite there in 2025.
Yeah. But can we just dive into Friday Night Frisbee? And there's other Friday games I want to touch on too. But Seattle Salt Lake meeting for the first time since the West Division title game. This is the free game on YouTube. I'll be there alongside Brian Jones. Always great to go to Zions Bank Stadium and see the Salt Lake fans who are among the best in the league and expect a really good atmosphere. Salt Lake does not have its A team. Like, let's be clear. Like, for College Nationals weekend, some players from a lot of good teams are out. And, the Shred were fortunate to have University of Utah star Will Selfridge playing for them early in the year. But at College Nationals, with Utah performing out in Burlington, Washington, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to make the finals, Monday, Selfridge understandably prioritizing College Nationals. No one begrudges that decision. But that's a big piece of their offense that's missing. Luke Jorgensen still out with an injury. So, next man up for this Salt Lake team that has, kind of been befallen by injuries, and the youth movement has been kind of thrown in there. So there is an opening for Seattle, I think, is my big point. Like, I think the best version of the Salt Lake Shred in 2025 looks to me to be superior by a couple notches to the Seattle Cascades with what we have seen so far. But maybe the Seattle team on the first day of the weekend can make something happen, and they need to, because the second day of a back-to-back against a team that they're 0-2 against is going to be really, really tough. So you asked before, like, who needs it more? Certainly Seattle needs it more at 1-3 than San Diego does at 3-1, but I'm way more confident and give the Growlers way more of a chance to get one on the East Coast than I really think Seattle has the chance to win at Salt Lake after what happened last year, or Oakland. I mean, do you disagree with any of that?
Not in particular. I do think it'll be interesting to see where this Cascades team comes out from with their backs against the wall. Again, we haven't really seen them in this position for quite some time. I still think that there's a fair amount of talent, but where they're sort of absent from, I think, is in the discipline of their mental game. Again, we've talked about there's still enough of a core from last year's semifinals team that I feel like they can punch a little higher than where they've been at so far this season. It's just a matter of, can they sustain it for more than a quarter or two at a time? Like it just feels like there's no continuity for an entire game in this Cascades team in 2025. I mean, even against Oakland in their last meeting, they were trading out throughout the first quarter, if not, almost entire first half with Oakland. It wasn't until the second half that the wheels started to really come off and the Spiders took hold of that one. But this Cascades team can still, I think, put up points on anyone. Their offense with Garrett Martin and Zeppelin Rana can still get out and run and just kind of intimidate any sort of defensive coverage. It's just a matter of, can they execute at the same level that they were once firing at, in 2024?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I expect the Cascades to be competitive, and I wonder if they will have the horses to hang with Salt Lake and in front of those Salt Lake fans. I mean, we know that the Cascades can win there. We've seen it happen at the biggest game of the year, and this, let's face it, like right now, this is the Cascades' biggest game of the year. It has not gone well so far. They haven't played badly necessarily,
No.
but you measure it by wins and losses, and they are 1-3 right now, and the schedule doesn't get easier this weekend for them. There are two games earlier on Friday than Friday night, before Friday night Frisbee starts. New York at Philly, and then San Diego at Carolina, which we've alluded to a bunch. Let's talk about New York and their weekend of overtime setbacks and what's next for the Empire. Because look, they were down 3-1, or no, they got broken on the opening point in Boston, and it felt like they were going to get blown out. And then they run off back-to-back breaks and take a 3-1 lead and, hang around, but then they run out of gas and they're down 17-13 with about 6:40 to go in the fourth quarter. And you're like, all right, this is a circumstance loss with Jack and Antoine watching on the sidelines in flats. And then that crazy finish, like, as you watched from afar, Adam, was that finish more about New York's defensive pressure or Boston just making cuckoo decisions, in your opinion?
Watching live, I thought it was the latter. I kind of thought it was Boston's game giving it away. But going back in the film, I was just completely impressed by New York's defensive adjustments and their ability to not let Boston be big down the stretch. In that first half, it was sort of the light and fireworks show that can be this glory roster with DeCrona and Babbitt skying out in space. You got Orion Cable coming underneath and becoming this, weaponized throwing talent suddenly for the Boston O. And in the
how about
second
that?
half, I mean, I kind of like it because teams are going to back him and fear him as a big in the receiver space. And
because he's 10 feet tall.
Right. And so for him to exploit that and just get open unders where he can come underneath and just unleash with this new disc that just flattens out into space. And again, when his targets are Babbitt and DeCrona downfield, you can't really knock it as a strategy. But anyways, when Boston started clicking on all cylinders in the first half and they're just playing intimidation ball, for New York to do what they did down the stretch and just sort of take the wings off of the Glory attack, it reminded me why they were a dynasty, not too long ago. And it reminded me of something that I loved hearing on the New York pod that was just dropped earlier today. We're recording this on Wednesday, May 21st. Dan Hilton had a great point. He said, I still think that this New York team has championship potential. It's just if they can make the playoffs. And he was very adamant in saying what a crazy statement it was to say if they make the playoffs. But I concur with him, man. I think that this New York team has shown enough to show that even despite their being down their best player, even despite, being 2-3 in the standings, if you give them a shot to get their legs underneath of you and get their identity established again, they're going to be able to punch with the best. It's just a matter of, has the hole become too deep for them to dig themselves out of?
Well, if they want to make the playoffs, I suggest winning in Philadelphia this weekend.
Well, yeah.
Obviously, we haven't seen the Phoenix lose yet. And, this is the Philly team has been the story of the season so far. We don't talk about them as much because they were off this past weekend. But, Philly also hasn't beaten New York since you were playing in the UFA. I think you were a star for that 2014. No, I'm just like, it's been a long time since the Empire.
Obama years. Yeah.
July 15th, 2017. So
Okay,
technically not, but
not quite.
Yeah, I think that's the last time that Philly beat New York, and that was a disastrous Empire season that ended well shy of the playoffs. And they've been in championship weekend every year since, until Boston beat them last year. New York's in an interesting spot because, you look at the pieces that they brought in, and I made this point a little bit last week, didn't I? Just talking about how they have all these guys that are good players, but they haven't had the pressure of we win here all the time. And I think we're seeing that wear on the whole team a little bit. Max Shepard was moved off the O-line at the end of the Boston game, played D-line on Saturday in Montreal. There's Liam Haberfield vibes there in that, yeah, Liam was a great player for Atlanta 2 years ago. Then he joins New York and just didn't fit in with what they wanted to do, which, doesn't mean he's not a good player because he's really talented. And we've seen Shepard do things. But clearly the Empire, with the decision they've made, have felt that they could make an adjustment for the better of their team, and they're still just trying to figure out what works. And they better figure it out soon, because if they don't, as Dan Hilton said, they're going to not make the playoffs because the East Division is really, really strong. Even at 2-3, they have the whole season ahead of them, right?
Yeah.
They are very much a team that you could see going on some runs, but you could also envision it getting ugly. If they lose this game at Philly, then they go at Toronto, and then their next two are against DC. I don't think the Empire are going to be sitting there at 2-7. I would be stunned if they only won 2 of their first 9 games. But as we sit here on May 21st, it's not totally out of the realm of possibility, because Toronto's going to be a tough team to beat in Toronto. Philly's going to be a tough team to beat in Philly, and DC is DC, and they got New York's number after what happened last year. So things have to change quickly for New York. I don't know what the right buttons to push are. I did find it interesting. You look at
I know two. One, Calvin Brown. He's absolutely firing lasers on offense for them right now, and I feel
he's making plays.
Just in terms of a generator, when they get Jack back and healthy, if they can just lean on the Calvin Brown and Jack Williams engine, I think they'll get a fair amount of ways. And Axel Agami-Contreras, can we talk about him for a second defensively for this Empire team? He felt like he was everywhere down the stretch in that fourth quarter against Boston last Friday night. And I just feel like there still is enough of the spirit of this championship Empire defense. And there's, Agami-Contreras, Brownlee, Antoine Davis when he's healthy, John Randolph. There are still enough patrollers on that side of the disc where if they do get, I think, a little bit more of the depth of this roster coming up a bit in terms of their performances, all of a sudden things are going to start clicking really quickly. And I hear you as far as the new additions not quite producing fruit maybe as quickly as New York was hoping for, but they're kind of at a point where they can at least free themselves from what they expected coming into 2025. It's not producing what they thought they would. And so now let's kind of figure out where we can play them. And I think that sets up New York for an interesting run down the stretch here, where again, if they do kind of catch a streak, if they do kind of figure out where the pieces fit, and suddenly it does look like the Brown and Williams lights and gun show on offense, and Ben Yot, who's quietly having a great season on the scoring end for the New York offense, suddenly it looks very much like a New York team that can make a lot of noise in an East Division that is still chaotic. My worry is that they won't really get a chance to even get there because this Philly team that they're going to face on Friday already knows what they're about. And to your point, I've just been so impressed by their ability to walk into 2025 and look like the most conditioned, most put together unit in the UFA right now outside of Atlanta. They're just playing team ball. There really isn't a player you can detach from the whole and say like, this guy is just carrying the entire unit. It's really been a combination of factors, and seemingly every week a new sort of star stepping up and having a career best performance for the Phoenix.
Yeah. So who do you have as the favorite Friday night in Philly, Phoenix or Empire? I'm not asking who you're picking. Who do you consider the favorite? What do you think the ultimate world expects from this game?
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and speak on behalf of the zeitgeist of Ultimate. That's a terrifying endeavor to even consider. But
that's what you do.
No, it's not. I try to form my own opinions that are 50-50 wrong.
Okay, then who do you have as the favorite?
Favorable take. I think going into this, you got to talk about the home team, Philadelphia. I think for just how they're playing, given the circumstances that New York is managing, given the fact that we'll see if Jack Williams is in full health going into this weekend. Hamstrings are notoriously hard to come back from. I just, especially the way that this Phoenix defense is just making every possession, all four quarters difficult for opponents. I think it's a really tough task for New York to have to go on the road again and have to find their rhythm with another new offensive lineup. I think that New York is sort of stuck changing gears right now because they haven't had a consistent O-line across their first 5 games so far. They keep trying a new sort of iteration each week. And I think that right now going against this Phoenix team that's going to, scout them well and know what matchups they want to attack, it's going to be an uphill challenge for New York, which is just an absolutely wild thing to say already in week 5.
Yeah, no. So what I'm about to say may not be totally rational, but here's how I'm thinking about this New York Philly game in a sense.
Yeah.
What's more likely? New York's 2-4 and Philly's 4-0, or New York beats Philly for the 119th consecutive time and gets to 3-3 and brings the Phoenix down a peg after their high-flying start to the season. I think the latter is way more likely. So I don't know what the odds makers would say, but
that's just crystal balling. I mean, what about the matchup makes you say that? Where do you think the success is for New York against Philadelphia specifically? I'm not saying I necessarily disagree with you. I just want to hear your math. Show me your math on this one.
My math is because New York has a dozen guys on the field that have a history of winning against Philly. And I think,
do you think that still matters in 2025? Because I think so far we've seen that is not a script that follows this season. Isn't that a fair point? Houston just did to Colorado? This notion that, talent and sort of the prevailing ways of ultimate centers that win traditionally are going to prevail.
Didn't I say that this wouldn't be entirely rational?
No,
preceding
you're right,
my comments.
You're right. Proceed.
But like, Philadelphia has had some breaks go their way over the first 3 weeks of the season. Like, if Theo Shapinski doesn't go doink, they probably lose that game because I don't see them
But
winning
that's
in
all good
overtime.
teams. That's all good
And, and
teams.
and New York has had a bunch of breaks go against them. You know, they're going back to that opening night in Oakland. Like, there were some tough calls that went against them late. Oakland absolutely deserved to win the game, but we've seen throughout multiple games, it's just been a tough stretch for the Empire. And look, this could be, as Bill Simmons says, their season from hell. It could be like, yeah, maybe Jack retweaks the hamstring in warmups, and they don't have Solomon Rushmeyer Bailey active. And John Randolph, who played 34 points, 27 of them on offense on the second day of the back-to-back in Montreal, might be the engine of the offense alongside Calvin Brown. And then where does that leave the D-line? And, like, there are – I'm not saying that the Empire are fixed or solved right now. I just think, like, I think about these things narratively, historically, and what does my gut say? And my gut says the Empire, after losing 2 games that they could have won, they could very easily be 4-1 right now. If a couple things had gone differently, I think the universe is going to level out. That's my gut.
Isn't
But
it funny,
we'll see what that's
though?
worth.
Isn't it funny, though, that the New York Empire organization is talking about if things just broke a little bit more in our favor? You know, speaking from a historical perspective, real long view here, it's just kind of funny how the tables have turned, eh?
I mean, trust me, it gives me no praise it gives me no joy to praise New York after what the Knicks did to my Celtics over the weekend.
Okay, all right.
That was excruciating.
I knew you were going to have to shove in some Celtic sorrow somewhere.
Oh, we're at a crossroads, man. It's sad. We
Oh, no.
Quick,
No.
10-second sidebar. The Knicks were outplayed by the Pistons in 5 of the 6 games in the first round. They were outplayed by the Celtics 5 of the 6 games in the second round. They're in the conference finals hosting game 1. Make it make sense. I mean, the answer is Jalen Brunson is unbelievable, and that's probably the end of it. But anyway, we're a Frisbee / basketball podcast, or should we veer back to where our lane?
I would love to hybridize it a little bit more at some point. I don't know if right now is the time. I'm just lamenting as a society we went away from those huge canes you would use to like pull people off stage. I feel like I need one of those whenever you start bringing up Boston sports in general, just sort of a way to lightly
I'm looking around my dining room to see if you installed contraptions that I haven't noticed.
Not yet, Evan, not yet. But getting back to Frisbee, I just, I hear what you're saying about New York. And again, I agree with the Hilton idea that if this New York team can make it all the way to the playoffs, they can definitely cause some noise once they get to the postseason. I mean, what other team could really doubt this New York organization?
I mean, they're a half game out of the playoffs right now, though. Like, it's not like they're have an insurmountable deficit or they need everything to break their way. Like, they still control their own destiny in every single way.
Absolutely. But there's the fact that there's so many other teams that do as well. Like, they've got both their games still coming up against a Rush team that's just looking to get its Bambi legs underneath of it. And as everyone that says going up against Toronto so far this season, we don't want to face them later on in the year. Is that going to come to fruition against this New York team that is, again, not quite entirely fully formed? Like, I think that there's so much to watch for in this week-to-week format where, in the past, maybe a half game out with, all these games that they could potentially get W's in would be a really nice enterprise for New York. Right now, they don't have a winning record. So over a longer term, it just feels like their luck isn't breaking in their way. And I can't trust them to just pick up wins, forecasted into the future, as we've been able to do for so long with this Empire team. I mean, it's just the East is a dogfight, and it feels like every other division at some level is as well. I mean, Chicago just upended Minnesota in their home
Yeah.
opener. I mean, Union get off a 7-1 run to start their season and just
Oof.
immediately remove all the oxygen from the room when it comes to the dynamic between those two franchises, right? Because Chicago kind of went into this season saying that was a little bit of an asterisk last year for Minnesota. Just wait until we're fully formed. Just wait until we hit the scene. Now they come into this year, they win decisively on the road without anywhere near their full strength roster, and now Minnesota has all these questions. It's just nothing is a given right now.
Yeah.
I know I kind of threw in some central
Yeah, no,
there,
I want to
touch on Chicago a little bit, but
I want to veer there too. Just one final point on the Empire.
yeah,
They were 61-4 in their previous 65 games before they lost to Atlanta last year, and I think they're like 9-8 in their last 17, which is just kind of staggering when you consider that they've lost twice as often in their last, season and a half as they did the previous 4 seasons combined. So yeah, Chicago, Minnesota. We should discuss this game because woof, that wind chill start. And if you didn't watch the game, Minnesota had a golden chance to break on the very first point and could have gone up 1-0 and gotten the D-line on the field. Like we have seen before in this rivalry on windy days, it's better to have your D-line out there, going on the break train. And Chicago got on that break train and choo-chooed their way to a demoralizing win for the wind chills perspective. Like great crowd, great atmosphere at the start. And I mean, the wind chill scored with Matt Rader was in the end zone with 15 seconds left in the first quarter, something like that, for their first goal of the game. They almost went scoreless in their first quarter in their first home game after winning a championship. It really was stunning. And they got back into the game. They righted the ship. They got within 3 and, made it a little bit interesting. But yeah, this goes for both Minnesota and DC. If you score 11 goals at home, you're probably not going to win. And I was really stunned to see the wind chill look as flustered and just unpolished as they did against Chicago. And the Union were not clicking on all cylinders by any means. They certainly deserved to win the game. They out-slopped the wind chill in a wonderful way that had to be really satisfying, especially when they didn't have guys like Nate Goff and Paul Arders and Tim Schock and a bunch of other guys that you would envision being amongst their top group of players in the lineup. But yeah, I don't really know how much we learned from that game just because it was so weird how bad Minnesota was. Are you drawing any conclusions from that? Do you take lessons away from that from the Minnesota perspective, or do you just throw the tape in the trash and expect them to look better at Pittsburgh this week?
I think it's too important of a rivalry game, and there's too much emotionality between these two franchises just entirely to say, look, we're just going to throw that one in a trash, weird circumstances. If we were just kind of taking things at a glance, I would just say that Chicago looked like the reigning champions in terms of their approach and discipline as far as matchup identification and what they wanted to do as far as when they got the disc in advantageous positions. They absolutely seized on that early game momentum you pointed out of being able to run up break scores by keeping the Minnesota offense on the field and keeping them out of rhythm. And I think that from a game planning standpoint, that is an absolute A+ on the report card for the Chicago team. I mean, as we keep saying, this is not anywhere approaching their full strength and potential for this 2025 season. And they got the win that they weren't really supposed to get. We kind of have been foreshadowing this coming into this year. This was the matchup that Minnesota really needed to kind of put their dominance on. They needed to show that they are the reigning champions. This is their home opener. They're they're going to assert themselves against this Chicago team that's been very loudmouthed and crass coming into 2025. And instead, they just lay an absolute egg. I mean, almost actually get offered in the opening quarter. I mean, what a kind of added chapter to Minnesota sports ignominy over the years, to follow up a championship win by almost going scoreless against your rivals at home in front of all those fans. It was just kind of, as somebody who grew up in that state, it was like oh no, it's happening again moment. And again, then on the flip side, you have for Chicago, the sort of jubilation that they were celebrating all their scores with. Hey man, we're back. We are the big brother in this dynamic. We won the last time we were here too. We've only won against Minnesota in the postseason the last few times we've matched up then. This Chicago team now can carry on into its season going, yup, we are exactly who we thought they were, and Minnesota is slightly behind us in the rear view. And I think until their next meeting, the Windchill are going to be struggling against that sort of mental hurdle that they've been behind in the past until they can clear Chicago again.
They meet again on July 4th, Friday Night Frisbee.
Whew.
In Evanston. Minnesota has not lost in that new Evanston Stadium that the Union plays. So they've had a knack for winning on the other's home field the past couple of years. I mean, Ben Feldman said to me, for whatever reason, they seem to have our number when we're at home. And that's very, very true, in a pretty frank way to put it. Yeah, I mean, nothing that I saw this weekend to the point of where we are right now makes me think we're not going to see Minnesota and Chicago in the Central Division Final in the beginning of August. Even if Chicago wins on July 4th, and the Union have an easier schedule than Minnesota. Both teams play Atlanta next week, but the Union get them on the second day of the back-to-back that the Hustle have. Minnesota also has to go to Salt Lake in July. So, we were talking in the preseason that Chicago could start 0-2 at Minnesota, home for Atlanta, and then probably get to 9-3 or 10-2 despite that start. Now you look at this Union team, and a not quite their A-plus squad goes and dominates the way they did defensively in those conditions, and you think could Chicago run the table? And obviously we're getting way ahead of ourselves because they still got to deal with Atlanta. They have, Madison at Breeze and obviously Minnesota again, where Minnesota has played well and won. That was the Noah Hansen block at the end game last year, right?
Yep.
It was a really, really close game that Minnesota got a block when it looked like Chicago was going down for the game-tying score at the end. Yeah, so I'm curious to see, because, let's be honest, disappointing couple of weeks for Pittsburgh. They win at home in their opener against Indy by a decent margin, but they were in control of the game the whole way. They go to Detroit, win by 5. That's fine. The Mechanix are what they are. And then Pittsburgh shows up to Breeze, and you were there, and you know better than I, just looked flat and not ready to go in the first quarter. Credit to the Radicals for coming out strong. And now Pittsburgh, as we talked previously, has this gauntlet of a schedule coming up with Minnesota and Carolina and Philly and Chicago. And will Minnesota do what they're supposed to do on the road this weekend and take care of business against a Pittsburgh team that doesn't quite look like it's at the level? Or is this who the Windchill are? Are they going to be an ugly team all year long, unable to play consistent offense in less than ideal conditions and, maybe not be the team that we thought they were? So that's my thought going into this weekend. Minnesota needs to prove to me that they are still a contender by going in and beating a Pittsburgh team that hasn't played well. Now, there's obviously the flip side of that from the Thunderbirds' perspective, where they want to change the narrative too. But you look at the rosters comparatively, and Minnesota's got more championship talent than Pittsburgh does at this point. This is a game they should win on the road in Pittsburgh. What were your takeaways from the Thunderbirds' perspective? Is Madison looked pretty convincing on Saturday at Breeze?
I worry about Pittsburgh against Minnesota's defense. I think that Madison showed you can really get this Thunderbirds backfield to kind of overcook itself and sort of produce too many throws to move the disc downfield. And I think that lends itself to a lot of not only turnovers in the backfield, but just sort of hesitation with the disc. I think you saw the Thunderbirds struggling to really get into the continuation looks that they like to get into on offense. And as a result, there was just a lot of in transition, almost handoff scores for the Radicals break train. And that sort of scenario just leads to some pretty downtrodden vibes right away. I mean, Pittsburgh's body language by the end of that first quarter just let it know that it was going to be a long night. And I think that, again, a Minnesota team coming off of an ugly loss at home is going to be looking to really kind of take it out on their next opponent. And with a windshield defense that is also known to kind of pin you back in your own end zone with pulls and let their defensive coverage blitz you again and again and again, we could see a similar result for the Thunderbirds at home this coming weekend if they're not careful. It will just kind of remain on if Thunderbirds offense can get a little bit more healthy. They were down a couple of starters this last weekend. Aiden Landis wasn't able to go. Jimmy Tall's been out with an injury since the beginning of the season, and Neil Dreos was out, I think with graduation it was. But, three of their main offensive contributors weren't able to make the trip to Madison. So that was definitely a factor. But I just think, this Thunderbirds team is still fairly young. They're still kind of trying to get a sense of their identity. And against a team like Minnesota that is so fully formed and kind of what it wants to do in defending its title, it's going to be a tough task for Pittsburgh to not pick up its second straight loss in as many weeks.
Yeah, I reached out to Jonathan Mast, who's Pittsburgh handler, second all time in the league in completions. This weekend will be his 100th game played in the league. So shout out John Mast and his longevity. And this is a quote that I should have included in the Tuesday toss, and I goofed, so I'll read it now. This is Mast. Quote, "Big picture, this is a wake-up call for our offense. A lot of those mistakes were things we feel are in our control. Timing, sharper cuts, cleaner resets, better rotation. This has to start at practice. We need to clip along at a faster pace, look at our focus, keep finding ways to get everyone involved, rotating through reps. Nothing revolutionary, just back to work, holding each other accountable, and building that rhythm rep by rep," unquote. We'll see if they can do it, because Minnesota's defense is the strength of that team. Yep. And this is not the team to have a get-right game against, even if you're at home.
And Minnesota's defense did show out pretty well this last weekend against Chicago. The wind chill offense really struggled to get off the field early in that game, but the Minnesota defense was able to kind of make something of it in the middle parts and at least get back into within striking distance before Union eventually closed it out. But it'll be something to watch for. I wanted to switch gears and talk a little bit about the South, and particularly the team at the top, Atlanta, and just... Again, they look like the best team in the league right now, and it kind of looks like there's beginning to be a bit of a gap in potentially whoever might be their closest runner-up. I know Boston and Oakland have looked really impressive. Again, Philly has had its white-hot start. Chicago, again, debuts fantastically, but this hustle team, I think, is really on to something, especially offensively. They're just kind of firing on all cylinders. Halsmeyer, once again, looks like an MVP candidate, and you could maybe pick two or three other players from that lineup as well. I mean, Austin Taylor is playing some of the best ultimate of his career. Hayden Austin Nab continues to, I think, polish his game into an all-around star in a way that many of us have been expecting for a couple of seasons, and it's awesome to finally watch reach the level. And then, honestly, I think what has been the secret sauce to much of their offensive attack, Adam Miller. I mean, talk about an addition and just a piece that fits what they've been trying to do for so long. If they need a receiving target downfield, it just seems like he's always able to find separation in that space. And as a thrower, not only for his creativity, but just his aggressiveness in attacking spaces and making everyone else into a weapon. It's such a potent blend alongside Draco, alongside Austin Taylor. And I'm interested to hear your thoughts about the hustle.
Well, one thing I just thought of that I've never thought about before is how I like the dynamic of, Austin Taylor, the righty, and Adam Miller, the lefty, in the
Oh yeah.
backfield side by side. And we see that in Boston with Ben Sadok and Ned Dick. We've seen it in New York in the past with Elliot Chartok and Solomon Rushmeyer Bailey. That's a cool dynamic to have, and it unlocks certain things and angles. But yeah, I'm totally with you on Adam Miller. I think this Atlanta offense right now is just the perfect mix of, great players, the guys that you mentioned, Holzmeyer, Austin Nab, Austin Taylor, playing at really high level, and fresh blood with, Cam Brock and Alec Wilson-Holiday and Adam Miller slotting in. And then the glue guys, right? Like Christian Olsen, first class glue guy, Carl Eckwurzel. You could just picture a guy like Eckwurzel coming in off the bench for an NBA team in the playoffs and
How about Sean Cannell?
doing little things. Yeah, Cannell too. I reached out to Cannell this week and then didn't quote him in the toss, but he was talking about just the culture of the hustle team, and I probably should pull up the quote because it was fun. I mean, I may have said this before, but he was the old guy on the Salt Lake Shred roster, and now he's on the younger side at 29 or 30. I think he's 30 on this Atlanta team. It's an older team.
They've got a little bit of a Masters Club going on with Cannell and Brock and some of those long stay hustle guys. There's some gray hairs on that hustle roster.
Yeah, but I'm glad you mentioned Cannell because I remember watching what I was able to watch this past weekend and seeing Cannell make a couple plays and just thinking man, what a really nice addition for this team. And they're using him and because I think you and I in the offseason thought yeah, that's the Bobby Lay replacement. He'll be alongside Austin Taylor in the backfield. But no, Tuba Benson-Jaja said to me preseason, Sean Cannell's way more of a hybrid than we realized. And we're pushing him downfield and he can throw it deep, but he can also go deep and he can work out of the stack.
He's been really good as a defender in coverage in transition. Yeah. He's already got 3 blocks in 5 games.
So yeah, he's rejuvenated in a way by this new team that's really, really good, that has gotten off to a great start, that has, a couple of absolute blue chips in, Brett Holzmeyer and Hayden Austin Nab and Austin Taylor. I think those 3 guys, kind of the way we saw with New York back in the day when they had, Yacht, Osgar, Babbitt.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yep. And we just think of 3 of the 5 MVP candidates are Empire. It feels that way right now with this Atlanta team. And yeah, I mean, they've got tough tests coming up. I mean, I expect them to beat San Diego at home, but it's certainly not going to be an easy game. And then the road trip at Minnesota and Chicago, the interdivisional nature is going to be really interesting. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I've been a fan of this Atlanta team for a long time, and feel for them because they've gone through the past few years what Carolina went through from 2016 to 2019, just always losing the biggest game, including a couple times on your home field, and just not being able to get over the hump. And look, that's still a hurdle that this Atlanta team has to traverse. Just with how good they've looked so far doesn't mean that they're going to be where we think they can be in Madison in August. But so they still have something to prove. But yeah, through the first 4 weeks of the season, no offense is looking crisper. No team collectively is looking deeper and better than the Atlanta Hustle. And I mean, they've got a really tough schedule all year long. I've been thinking with Austin beating Colorado the way they did, Atlanta has a lot of work to do, including all those tough games that I mentioned. But there's a roadmap where we've got undefeated Austin at undefeated Atlanta on Friday Night Frisbee, June 27th. And as the broadcaster programming side of me, I'm That would be really cool. That would be a game we could really hype if we had an undefeated matchup of division leaders that late in the season. So long ways away. That's over a month from now, but there is a roadmap, if Atlanta can go to the Midwest and get 2 wins. But yeah, I'm with you on this hustle team. And look, they have, it hasn't been perfect as well, because like Michael Fairley hasn't played very much. I think he got married this past weekend. Congratulations to Mike. He's one of the captains of this team and certainly one of their key guys on defense and their key energy, attitude guys. So Cameron Brock hasn't played every game. They're still working him in. But yeah, I don't think there's a team in the league that has more options, more good buttons to push, and a better vibe right now than the Atlanta Hustle.
Yeah. And to your point about the new pieces, I'm just astounded at how they're able to get, it feels like, the max potential out of each of them. You talk about Knoll, Cameron Brock and Alec Wilson-Holiday have fit in perfectly as the finishers on a lot of these drives for the Hustle offense. I mean, along with Langdon and Eckwertzel, I don't think there's a better foursome of finishers in the entire association than what the Hustle have going. And that's, again, outside of the 3 MVP candidates that they could possibly produce on that side of the disc as well. I just think that they're, again, firing on all cylinders. I just wanted to touch for a second on the other team in the South that's undefeated, 4-0 Austin.
Yeah.
They now get a breather until June in their schedule. But as far as a team that has their best players playing their best ultimate, I don't know that any team outside of Austin is quite as at max potential like the Soul are currently. I mean, Jackson Potts, Kyle Henke, Joey Wiley wasn't active this past weekend, but when he's been on fire for the Soul offense. There's something to watch. And on defense, they've picked up a few of these Dallas players. They've got Connor DeLuna, Owen Johnson, slotting in alongside a couple of other Soul projects with like Jake Reinhardt and the emergence of Noah Powell. This Soul defense has a lot of athletes, a lot of speed. They can challenge a lot of discs in underneath space. I think they're able to kind of put the clamps on some teams and really make them work down in that Texas heat. I hear you on that upcoming Atlanta versus Austin potential battle of the undefeateds. I'm really enticed by what the Soul are doing so far this season. I just want to see it against not a Colorado team on the second game of a back-to-back, not Houston again, a familiar foe.
Yeah, they've had a friendly schedule.
Yeah, I need to see it against the Carolina, the Atlanta. I want to see this high octane, woo-ha kind of.
Yeah, and to be fair, for Austin to still be undefeated on June 27th, they would need to win at San Diego on the second day of a back-to-back, and this also presumes that they would take care of business at LA. So they've got a ways to go. But I'm with you, and it speaks to how we overlook Austin. And that, I mean, I don't think it is like there's reasons for it, right? Like, yes, they made championship weekend a couple of years ago in pretty stunning fashion, but they feasted on their Texas opponents. They've had a friendly schedule in the past. They've lost Evan Swiatek and Mark Evans and Jake Radak and Duncan Fitzgerald and other guys that were important for them. So it was easy to overlook them. And with the schedule they've had, it's easy to overlook them. But I talked to Stephen Nagy before the season, and I shared some of his thoughts on the pod then. But he was so confident in his team before the season began. He talked about how they have 3 brand new captains in Jake Reinhardt, Reese Bowman, and Jackson Potts. He said a new tone has been set. He said the best way to describe our team right now, and again, this is Najee speaking before the season started, best way to describe our team right now, it's rare to acknowledge when you're in the midst of something special. This season feels like one of those special times. It's the most selfless team I've been on in over a decade. Our whole team is bought in. And so far, all of that feels right.
Yeah.
And kudos to him. Because look, I hear glowing praise from a lot of coaches that I talk to. I'm spending a lot of time this week preparing for college nationals. every coach and captain I talk to thinks their team is going to win the college championships this weekend.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
just kind of the nature of being an athlete and believing that you can do it and training your mind to think that way. But then the rubber meets the road and you get punched in the face and you have to deal with the adversity, and that's sports. And the Soul are going to get hit with that adversity at some point. And it could be, at LA on a Friday night a few weeks from now. Who the heck knows? If Colorado can go to Houston and lose, and Austin could go to LA and lose. That wouldn't be stunning. Remember that great Austin-LA game, one of the greatest games in the history of the league, back when they were not in the same division with each other?
2018.
The Kyle Henke buzzer beater game that was way more than just a Henke. That was one of the best games I've ever called.
Brent George had a great layout.
That Brent George layout. Yeah, what an awesome game that was.
It's a sneaky great interdivisional matchup, LA Austin. It's had a couple of nice finishes over the years. So now
they're division rivals, Adam. Rivals, Austin and LA.
Until this point, interdivisional, I should say, just to be clear.
Yeah, the Soul lose Matt Armour as well. He was such a valuable player for them.
Yeah, I think that one, alongside the Fitzgerald and Radak, just given the amount and volume that they handled in the throwing backfield for the Soul, that was the kind of key indicators that their arrow might be pointed down this year. But kind of to your point in the quote from Najee, the young player buy-in on the Soul team might be the best in the UFA this season. I mean, every single one of their kind of, we don't know enough about them, kind of coming up through on the Soul team guys just feels like they're playing through the roof right now. I mean, the Armstrong brothers, we need to talk about them more at some point. Again, Noah Powell on defense absolutely blanketed Quinn Finer on Saturday night. I mean, was winning foot race after foot race in space with one of the best offensive players in the entire world right now. Yeah. It's just kind of, to your point, next man up. It feels like whoever needs to make the play in the moment is going to do it. Younger Henke, little stinker, Mark Henke coming through in the clutch with a big goal in a physical moment against Colorado when they were kind of trying to make a comeback. It's just, to the Najee quote, kind of feels like something special is starting to happen. They just need to seize on it when they get opportunity against some more proven playoff competition.
Yeah, not preseason Najee quote on Noah Powell. Noah, former college track star, speed demon that's a beast in the gym. He'll be covering other teams' rabbits. And
he's fun.
That's what we've seen.
He's absolutely on that kind of Kanaki Island level where it's just, you can tell it's work out into space getting him off of you. And if there's any disc that has float underneath it, he's going to track it. Total hunter. And to put him alongside of Jake Reinhardt and Mick Walter, the institution of Mick Walter, we talk about all these Soul veterans who left the team. How about Mick Walter, who felt like he might have retired, 3-4 seasons ago, sticking around into what might be his 10th year with the team, I think at this point. Well, they became a franchise in 2016, so I guess it would be his 9th season with the team now. Quite. But he continues to make a crucial play every single game for this franchise. He's, again, just been around since day one. I really like just the flavor of this 2025 Soul team. I don't know how far it'll go in the postseason, but I'm definitely signing up for the ride.
Yeah, no, it's fun. And they have a few weeks off before they head to the West Coast, June 6th and June 7th. They're 4-0. They'll be undefeated at least until June, and who knows. We didn't talk a whole lot about Oregon's win over Seattle, and I guess we didn't talk a ton about Houston's win either. I'm curious to get your thoughts quickly on each of those, and Philly got the big win over DC, and we're like, all right, this is really cool, but what are they going to do against Toronto? Well, then they backed it up. Between Oregon and Houston, which of these teams do you feel is more likely to back it up? And, it's convenient that Oregon's next game is at Vegas.
Well, I was going to bring up that.
Yeah. So they got a much easier road ahead than Houston does. just in terms of this game. They got Oregon, Vegas on Friday, and Colorado on Saturday, so not an easy road. But you understand the question, like which of those two teams do you feel like has a chance to keep making noise going forward?
Well, I kind of put them in the same bracket of like scrappy underdog, who I don't know exactly how much higher these wins raise their actual ceiling. They're exciting for the franchises. I'm all behind them. But at the same time, I don't know that it really changes much beyond it's exciting for now, like you're saying, without that kind of backup and then another win in the W column. I'm waiting to see what really becomes of Oregon and Houston after these seminal moments. But I don't know, man. I'm both excited for them, and I want to just pause before adding on too much. I think that Oregon has a fantastic opportunity against Vegas this coming weekend, with Barham and Thones in the lineup, two of the best deep throwers in the world, it feels like at times. They just have a puncher's chance in almost any matchup. And then with Houston, there's such good integrity to that organization and sort of the vision that they're all striving for. And I thought you got fantastic quotes from head coach Beck's fourth and some of the players after their win and the Tuesday toss that you wrote this week, kind of outlining that. But I need to see Houston not make mistakes like that again for a second straight game. I need to see Oregon's defense be as opportunistic as they were against a Cascades team that they have a lot of confidence against. As you got a great quote from Barham from Oregon, the Steel expected to win going into that game. I don't know how many other times outside of this Vegas matchup coming up that they're going to feel that way against an opponent. And so it's just kind of like, what you were saying earlier, sort of where do these expectations meet reality? Where do you kind of come out of the dojo, so to speak, and actually have to face down your opponent? I think what we've seen so far this season is that everyone has a chance. It's a more wide open field than we've ever experienced before. And there really shouldn't be expectations going into a lot of these matchups, but it's still on teams, I think, to perform and sort of prove themselves in this climate. We can't just say like, oh, this result portends absolute, success going into the future. It's more of like, well, this definitely unlocks a different sort of level than we've thought of before with this given franchise.
Yeah. For the Steel, David Barham is active this weekend. Ben Thonis, currently at Oregon State, he'll be playing a college national, so he is inactive for the Steel. But yeah, like both Oregon and Houston, their next game is very, very winnable. Oregon at Vegas. Houston's next game is at LA next weekend. So, and I'm sure the Aviators are looking at that game like that's their chance to turn their whole season around. And they've got a lot of veteran pride as well. So, there are a lot of interesting games. And I think we couldn't finish the podcast, Adam, without at least doing 7.5 seconds on Detroit Indy this weekend. The Mechanix losers of 86 of their last 87. The game is in Indy. The Mechanix next two games, I believe, are against the AlleyCats. So, they're envisioning you doing a standings update a couple of weeks from now, and Detroit's 2-1 in the playoff mix in the Central. What do you expect? I ask reluctantly.
Other than the four horsemen coming over the horizon line. I mean, look, I'm just rooting for Joe Cubitt, who will be making his 2025 debut this coming weekend. I'm rooting for him to finally get a win in this league. He'll be making his 49th start as a pro. Still hasn't gotten one in the W column. I'm just kind of rooting for
Except for the All-Star game. He won the All-Star game in 002.
Yeah, but again, that doesn't count. So, unfortunately, that is an exhibition game. Like, I would just like to see him get an actual win in this league. I think he's been a hard worker for a really long time. One of the most interesting throwers to watch on film that we've ever seen. Truly ambidextrous thrower when he gets going. And if he can find any sort of rhythm alongside Jake Felton, I think that Mechanix attack can be very highlight friendly. I could see this game easily approaching 30 scores for both teams. I mean, it just feels like defense might be at an absolute premium with both teams just looking to light up deep space. Very young rosters, kind of just looking to go after it.
So are you picking Detroit?
Not quite.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I'll lean Indy at home. Until we see Detroit win a game, they're still the team that. Gosh, when was the last time Detroit won a road game? Because their last win was before last year against Pittsburgh. Was when they had Chicago at home in 2017, right?
Yeah, we'd really have to be going back into the annals of history in order to get that information, and I don't know if I have that at this point in the recording.
Yeah. Last time Detroit won a road game. Detroit won at Chicago June 5th, 2016, 17-15.
That is Obama administration, and that's a good little bow to put on the end of this episode.
Eric Hubbard and skunk Nathan Champeau were the Mechanix leaders in goals that day. They won with an 82% completion rate and 40 turnovers. Chicago had an 80% completion rate and 44 turnovers. Yikes.
We've come a long way, Evan. We've come a long way.
84 turnovers.
It's a different game these days.
Of
I've been trying to say this for a very long time at this point. The evolution in this league over the last several seasons is something to behold. And now we're here where we're talking about potentially any team upsetting anyone in any given matchup.
Detroit won their 2016 season opener with 68 turnovers. They had 39 blocks.
That was the Blizzard game, right, against Cincinnati?
April 2nd, 2016 against Cincinnati.
Yeah,
they completed. Oh, there are highlights of this game. Oh, I'm so excited.
That was in a blizzard. All right, we've got to wrap up this episode. I'm losing Evan. We're really excited for the upcoming Week 5 slate. You've got Seattle at Salt Lake in Friday Night Ultimate. Evan will be calling that one in a rematch of last year's West Division title game. Seattle sitting at 1-3, needing a win on the road against the Shred, who will be looking for revenge after losing at home in the West Division Championship game in 2024. And then on Saturday night, we've got a great Game of the Week matchup between San Diego, who will be playing their second game in as many nights, against the Hustle in Atlanta. Atlanta protecting a 5-0 record. Those games will be available on the UFA YouTube app, the Friday Night Frisbee, and then the Watch UFA TV app for Saturday night's Game of the Week matchup. Evan and I will be watching alongside with you, and we will be back on Swing Pass to recap all the action. That'll do it for now. Bye, and Frisbee forever.